All right. Hello. Welcome everyone out there in Zoom land. I hope that you guys have your glasses of red wine ready. Welcome. We've got Karen Fontanella here. I'm so happy that so many of you guys have come out to join us, and it's being well, it'll be fun seeing all your comments and questions and answers and everything coming through. I'm also here with Jeff Fontanella, my husband, who is also our winemaker.
Hello, everyone from the cellar. Glad you're here.
We like to keep him in the cellar as much as possible, so we quarantined him there, and I don't know, he seems really happy. And then we've got Jennifer Owen, who's here, and she's actually in our office right now. She's our wine club manager and director of sales.
And of course, Bert Reynolds, keeping it real, holding it down.
So we thought we'd start by checking out a little bit about what's going on here. So today we're set up to do a comparative tasting of our Mount Veeder Cabernet from both the 2008 and the 2016. And these are two of Jeff's favorite vintages that he's ever made. So, so go ahead and get your glasses ready. But we thought we'd kind of talk to you a little bit about what is going on in Napa today. So I went out on the property and took this picture literally like an hour ago. Today was 90 degrees in Napa, so it's a little on the warm side for now, and sunny. And we haven't seen any of those murder hornets yet, so I think we're pretty safe. We're still just in quarantine with our regular group of bugs and whatnot. So here's the pond, and as you can see, the vines are coming along. And then we kind of honed in a little bit closer and thought Jeff could maybe give us a little vineyard report, as now that spring has sprung and the vines have come to life. So maybe Jeff, you could talk a little bit about what's going on in the vineyard right now.
Yeah, sure. So we're doing a lot of pre-bloom activities right now. And so that stage is, the period after bud break and before the flowers start to bloom. If you see that picture up on the right-hand corner there, you can actually see the cluster forming. Now those look like little tiny berries, but they're actually flowers that will bloom in the next couple weeks. And if all goes well, they'll set a berry. Each one of those will set an individual berry. And so far, so good. We've had really nice spring weather. We've had a dry winter, which means that we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed that we don't have a really hot summer, because we probably are as dry as we were in 14 and 15, but those produce great vintages too, very concentrated. Typically when we have drier conditions in spring, we have the potential for some pretty small berries. The smaller the berry, the higher the concentration and the resulting wine. So we're kind of off to a really good start in spring. So it's beautiful out here. I wish everyone could visit. Unfortunately, hey, we are where we are with the COVID and everything. But hopefully soon enough, we'll have people out here. The vines will probably be up to the top wire by then, and we'll be looking much more like a full mature vineyard when you get here. But nonetheless, things are off to a really great start.
And typically, Jeff, we harvest in September. Is that our usual target? And do you even have a sense at this point?
Okay, for the Cabernet that we're looking at, our typical range is October 1st to, mid-October. Later years, we might even pick Mount Veeder into November. So the Cabernet is going to be one of the last coming off the vine, typically one of the late varieties. Due to its really rich phenolic makeup, it just takes longer to get ripe. It's not just a sugar thing, it's the phenolic development and getting to that flavor profile that we want. It just takes longer. It's more complex of a grape. There's more hang time needed, more hang time required to get it mature. Yes.
Jeff for the Vineyard Report. So then we also wanted to make share a picture we sent from one of our wine club members. Cheers to Dave and Sherry Leach in North Carolina. They're drinking some of our Beckstoffer George III from 2014 with one of our beautiful Fontanella decanters.
And we've got a couple other anniversary shout outs we wanted to give. Sharice and Luis Alvarez, I know you guys are watching and you wanted to spend your anniversary out here with us, and then COVID, so cheers and happy anniversary to you. And also Arnell and Bernadette Dulé, I know it's your 27th anniversary today, so cheers to you.
Cheers.
Cheers, you guys. Happy anniversary. I'm glad you're sharing it with us. All right, so just some formalities. Again, we're tasting the 08 and the 16. If you don't have it, that's okay. You're just going to hear Jeff talk a little bit about what those vintages brought and what makes them so special. It might encourage you to want to still purchase them later, which we'll tell you a little bit about later. But at the same time, enjoy the presentation and just listening to Jeff talk about how a great vintage is created. And we have a question and answer feature that's on the webinar, and that's the way that we can interact with you guys. So if you have questions, comments, I'm going to ask maybe throughout the webinar to maybe tell us like, well, what are you tasting in the wines? What are you seeing? And what kind of questions do you have? These are the things that are going to help Jeff really respond to what you're wondering about. And so make sure you use that question and answer feature to communicate with us. And with that, let's go ahead and start talking. We're going to start with the 2008 first. So if you have the 2008 open and you're ready to taste some of that, that's what we're going to start talking about. And so we thought we'd start by talking about what was going on in 2008. 2008 was a really big year for us here at Fontanella, which was really kind of great that this is one of the best vintages Jeff feels like we've ever had because it was such a monumental year for us. So in 2008, the main event was that we built the winery that year. So as you can see, we had the blueprints from the winery building that went up in 2008. And we thought we'd share some pictures of the kids, of course. So we were under construction. Our oldest son, John, in 2008 was a year and a half years old. And what was that? So little, so cute.
Look at that little guy. Look at that. He's the smallest guy who ever built a winery. Look at John right there.
And then Drew is just 6 months old. So we had those two little nuggets and a whole construction crew on site. So it was a crazy, crazy time for us. As you can see with the picture of the four of us behind us, they were pouring the concrete pad for the winery. And then this is a picture of the framing. Of course, you can see a younger Jeff Fontanella. Of course, Jeff. Darn you, you look the same.
He does.
It's the wine.
It's the wine. And then I love the cool picture of the frame of the winery from a distance as that was going up. And the day that the tanks came in, for some reason, that really kind of made it real for me. We were up at the house with the kids and they brought those shiny tanks in. And I think that was the first time that I felt like this is happening.
It was fun watching those go in. That was a really good day.
I don't think I've ever seen Jeff happier. Well, maybe when the kids were born, but
well,
it was fun. So so the framing went up, and this is a picture that was the actual out in the vineyard picture. So it's obviously Jeff and Drew, our younger son, and then John.
That's actually up. That looks like it's up in the volcanic ash vineyard. So for people who've done tasting kits over the years, and tasted through the barrel samples and things at the cellar, that's just about a mile north of us, up the ridge of Mount Veeder.
Yeah, it's a beautiful property, and it was fun. I still remember the day we took the kids up and went out to check out these grapes and everything. It was pretty special. And of course, so 2008, we finished construction and we actually crushed our very, very first grapes. And so this bin of grapes was the first wine that was grapes that were ever crushed here on our property.
Karen, what are you feeding your son? What is that?
I swear that it's just grape juice. Everyone else had champagne. I had grape juice in that glass. So it's our tradition every year, and which started obviously in 2008. Our first year was to toast the first grapes that come in with champagne, and we still do it every year. We stop everything when the first grapes come in, no matter what it is or when it is, and we have a champagne toast and bless the grapes. So this was the very, very first year, and it was exciting.
And then we finish harvest with what other special beverage?
Oh, we finished harvest with tequila.
Yeah, yes, we do.
So I think in summary, 2008 for the Fontanellas were, really a time of new beginnings with the winery going up, the kids just being little, and there's some kind of fun family pictures there too. Some of my favorites. So with that, let's have Jeff talk about the 2008 vintage.
Yeah, great. Those pictures are great. I mean, there was a lot going on there. What I remember, Karen, you were still a full-time attorney. we were going a million directions all the time at once. You know, chasing both the kids. I was making wine and consulting. I think I had wine in 6 different facilities at that time. I would put like 15 or 20,000 miles on my car every harvest, just getting to where I needed to be, checking vineyards, checking on other projects and those kind of things. So yeah, it kind of, you know, we had one employee, remember those days? And in fact, that harvest, I think the two of us, my one employee and I think we muscled through 100 tons together. It was just the two of us. So it was quite an inaugural harvest.
And that was and in that year, just like little backstory too, is that we didn't have any, like Jeff said, we only had one employee total. And so I was the only one doing tastings or doing any sales or any of that. So like I was marketing sales team and tasting room.
Baby in the backpack, answering the phone, you know, topping barrels. Yeah, we did all that. It was quite a start.
Good times.
So the 08 vintage, I think even it's fun to look back. The old tasting notes in the newsletter was even, I was writing, oh, this is my favorite vintage. So it's kind of funny that I actually said that. I didn't remember that. And we saw the old tasting notes this week. I was going, wow, it isn't just that we've made up this little 08-16 thing, which I think what it is with these vintages, because they are truly two of my favorite vintages, not because they were very similar so much of weather and growing conditions and those kind of things, but the complexity and the characteristics that were in the wine when we were bringing in the grapes, that's what's really, I think, you know, coin or park these in my mind as two of my favorite vintages. So, you know, in 08, we were we were going crazy, but that year we had kind of a low rainfall year, it was a little bit dry, kind of like this year. But what we had in late April and May kind of queued up a huge frost event. It was one of the more severe frost events we had in Napa. We followed that up during bloom time with some huge heat spikes that further kind of adjusted the crop downwards. I think the crop took, or the frost took maybe 30% of the crop. The bloom shattered from the heat wave, the extreme heat took something else off of it. We had huge heat waves late that summer in September. It really felt like by the time we were like turning the lights on in here and being done with construction, that we'd just been raked over the coals by this growing, you know, the year, that we were all worried about the fruit and if it was going to have enough stamina to weather all this heat and these extreme events to get to a good harvest. And somehow, right, you know, say mid-September, the weather just changed and we went into this, you know, very awesome finish. So I look back on the notes and we talk about, oh, this glorious year, but it really was mostly an epic finish that gave us this long hang time and let the vines recover a little bit from the kind of the beating, so to speak, that Mother Nature was dishing out during most of the year. And we were left with a vintage that was very low yield, but huge on concentration. And that's what was super exciting when we were processing these grapes. We could see it in the tanks. We could see it when we first went to barrel. And they were kind of exploding in concentration, even as young wines pre-bottling. So it's going to be really fun to compare these two vintages. But why, you know, part of the interest with aging the wine, I think a lot of people ask this a lot. They ask about how long do we age wine? When do you know it's good? And these kind of things. And a little bit about why we would want to age the wine. When the wine's young and we first bottled it, we have this huge array and complex just matrix of phenolics, acid, fruit profile, aromatics, just a huge array of different chemicals that are put into the bottle. And as it ages, those things slowly kind of unwind and kind of open up their complexity and their layers. I mean, in general, acidity tends to soften. The tannin level starts to soften and open up. The fruitiness, the really fresh kind of brightness in the berry, the kind of the upfront fruit starts to become less dominant so that you can see all of the other layers. And, you know, the mouthfeel tends to just get longer. The mouthfeel gets wider, the volume goes up, and it tends to lengthen and draw out. So that's why we've aged wines. I think the first time the first notes of people aging wine, I think that I've read is the Romans. They used to lay wines down. They even tried to manipulate aging by using smoke and different kind of vessels and things to help open some wines up. So this is not a new concept, but it's one that's still somewhat mysterious. So it'll be fun to taste this, and we can all gauge where it's at versus a young wine that's still got all of its structure and power and youthfulness.
You said something yesterday, Jeff, because we got to do a little pre-tasting yesterday with the team just to see where the wines were, and I really liked what you said about the book, right? Like a younger
right.
like, yeah, do that one. I like that one.
It's kind of like if you know, a really good wine, if you've bought it and it's young, a novel that's never been opened, the pages are dense and packed in together. And as it's aged, you can really, it's much easier to fold open and see and actually, you know, access all of those individual parts of the book, I guess. I don't know, a loose metaphor, right?
I liked it. That worked for me. Thank you.
So the 08, I hope you have it. We have been very excited. We opened this yesterday, as Jen alluded to, and it was just, I mean, as soon as you pulled the cork, the aromatics are coming out, and you can really, really start to get a sense for this vintage and how concentrated it was. Those aromatics are one of the first cues you get that the wine is going to have a lot to offer, even in the palate. So the grapes from this vintage were about a little different than the 16, which we'll talk about, but still very similar in the thread of things. It was about 2/3 from our volcanic ash vineyard. About 1/3 of it was shale. We didn't have any grapes in 08, but the shale was actually grown right at the south border, our neighbor to our south. So Cabernet from that property, very similar soil type. It was actually the budwood source that we used for about 1/3 of this property. We really liked that block of Cabernet, and kind of went to school on our neighbor a little bit. They were a few years ahead of us, and we'd always been looking over the fence, and I'd been working with some of those grapes for years, and figuring out, you know, what we would do differently or what we might mimic in our own vineyard as we got into the estate plantings. So the 08, hopefully you've got one there, but I've just get really blown away by the nose, the aromatics, the cherry, the floral. There's even some really nice floral notes that keep coming out of that. There's hints of blueberry. There's this kind of dark, to me, very dark caramelized sugar, or maybe you could think of it as like a dark, like a caramelized fig component to it. Just very expressive. I mean, you don't really have to get your nose too close to the glass, and you can already get a sense of this bouquet. And in the
If you
palate,
guys are, just real quick, if you guys out there are tasting the 08 right now and have some like tasting notes you guys want to share, or different aromatics you're getting, please put it in the Q&A so we can kind of see what you guys are tasting out there as well. We'd love to hear that.
And nothing is wrong. We will not laugh at you.
Jen always
Your face,
laughs.
not laugh to your face.
And what I remember when we crushed this, that was very prevalent. I mean, this fruit, the fruit concentration in this vintage was kind of off the charts when we first brought it in. So it was really dark cherry and currant at the beginning, and when it was younger. So there was a lot more of that blueberry and darker fruit at the very beginning. That tends to soften some of those jammier qualities, and some of that fruitiness does tend to soften as it ages and kind of become a little less prevalent. In the palate, I mean, I really get this really nice currant and plum. The fruit has kind of evolved that way. The tannin to me has taken on a little bit, almost like a dark chocolate texture in the finish. Maybe some sweeter tea leaves, you know, nothing too dry, but there's hints of those kind of things. The fact that floral quality keeps hanging around, to me, shows that this wine is going to age progressively longer. That's one of the more delicate pieces that tends to kind of disappear early. I mean, overall, this is a vintage that still is my favorite. I mean, it is aged extremely well. It's done nicely in the bottle. It still has so many layers to offer, and the fruit quality in it is still very intact. So we're not getting tired. We are seeing really nice dark color still. You have just a nice little brick red edge. So there's no brown yet. The phenolics that give it its purple and black hues have held up extremely well. And as they fade over time, you'll get a little bit of a red and a brick kind of a color. But we're just barely seeing that here 12 years in on this wine.
So just to chime in a little bit, as you guys noticed, Jeff was looking at the rim
Hard
of
to show on Zoom.
glass. Yeah. But if you use a white piece of paper and you hold it up against it, you really can see the color on the edge of the wine. And especially if you have the 08 and the 16, you can really see the difference of what an aged wine looks like. To me, it was super instructive to kind of see the difference between the two. And then we've got a couple people out there that have been commenting about some of the aromatics. Fig was one that I certainly get a lot of fig in the wine as well. And then we've got some say cedar and wet leather on the nose maybe. And
yeah, very typical of Cabernet for sure.
I love
and a
that.
little bit of that's coming from the oak, the oak extraction during aging in barrel. And so now it's kind of evolving that way. Yeah.
We got honeysuckle, blackberry, fig. Yep.
We opened these yesterday, like I said, and it took us a few minutes to get to these sort of constructive tasting notes because the first few minutes of the tasting were filled with some very colorful, not suitable for work language, which was like, damn, that's good. That's a direct quote from Carol Ann, right? Our assistant winemaker. And I think there were some F-bombs thrown in there because it's just so beautiful. And I hope lots of you out there are getting to experience this with us. It's pretty special.
And I think one of the things that I noticed on it, as you know, not having the sophistication and level of Jeff, is that when you start comparing the two, is that this just has, like, when you finish, it just keeps kind of coming at you. Like, it doesn't, once you've had a few sips, then you know, it still provides, which is really an amazing thing, I think.
And so that's part of the aging process. So why we lay bottles down is that, to me, those layers and the complexity, it gets a little more open, it gets a little broader, all those little nuances are a little more accessible, and the mouthfeel and the length of the wine tends to expand. You know, over the course of its life, we're going to see it kind of evolve and open up and become a very, you know, very well-aged wine, and then it'll get to a point where it starts to cascade down the other side. So
we had someone out there, which I thought is actually a really good question, about in terms of serving the red wine. Do you like it straight out of the, you know, temperature wise? Like, do you want it
straight out the bottle? Yeah.
Well, that's the way I like it. But do you want it, like, you know, and particularly a red wine, like, is it, you know, what temperature is really optimal for tasting it?
Boy, I think there's a sommelier answer, which I'm not, but for me, a little cooler than room temperature is the way I like to pour it. If I pull it out of the cellar or like our wine deal and it's 55, I might let it come up to 60 or 65. And I think that, to me, that's where it tastes really, really spot on.
So when you taste your whites, do you taste them at the same temperature or do you taste them cooler?
If I'm tasting for, say, blending or something like that, we're tasting them at cellar temperature, you know, more around 55, 60, in that kind of range, 65, even if we let them get up to speed on the lab bench. But if I'm tasting because I'm going to have it with food or we're just enjoying it, no, I want it to be chilled down, you know, to serving temperature.
No, that's great. All right, so if out there, do you guys, anyone else have any particular more questions about the 08 before we move on to the 16? I think, Jen, do you see any others that we should address before we move on?
I guess I just would want to dig in just a little bit harder on this idea of like when a wine peaks, because Jeff, you were talking to me about it today. Like, it's not necessarily the idea of like a mountain, like there's this perfect time to open a wine, and it could be more subjective and it's kind of like a plateau. Could you just dig in?
Yeah. So the way I think there's I think in the sommelier world, there's something called like Coates' law. And it basically says, or it's more of a theory, but I like law. Law sounds good. that if it takes a wine X number of years to reach its peak, that's going to transcribe into roughly the same number of years as the wine will drink at its peak, right? And it's at its best. So it's more of a plateau.
So you always say, like for our cab, you say 3 to 5 years. No, you say 5 to 7 years for our cab. So you're thinking then the plateau also would last 5 to 7 years from that point.
And that's what's difficult with I guess putting a number on it, so to speak. If you had to put a hard number on it, what you have to define what's peak and what's optimal. There may be some people who are like, I enjoy fresher wines. This 08 almost has a little too much age. And so if they like them 3 to 5, I mean, that's going to show very bright. You're still going to have more of the acidity pronounced. You're still going to have more of the fruitier esters and all those things are still going to be much more dominant in the nose. It's going to take you a few years to get there, and it's going to be that way for a few more. So it kind of tightens this law up, right? It's going to create a little bit different shape. I think most people, and for me, I've tasted this wine. We've tasted it every year for the last couple of years. And I would say it's gotten into this peak zone in the last 2 years. And so for me, I kind of feel like this is going to stay in this range for another 8 to 10 years. And I mean, that's what I think is so cool about this vintage, is like it really kind of followed a very classic curve that would say that this Cabernet is going to be in a great drinkable stage for 20 years.
And this stuff is so subjective. I guess I also want to just bring it home. It was part of the reason you guys designed the club the way that you did, is that ideally when we send out, say, the Cabernet in February, we're sending 3, 6, or 12 bottles of the same vintage. And the idea is like maybe have one now and then lay the other 2 down and revisit every year to kind of find your sweet spot for when you like our wines. And then the other really sexy gadget, because everyone likes a gadget, is the Coravin, right? And we've got one in the tasting room. And I think it was invented by a doctor, right? And it's the surgical needle, and you can go whoop right into the cork and pull a little bit of wine out so you can taste some of your nicer bottles just to see if it's kind of in that sweet spot for where you are. So that's something that you can buy and take home to sort of test drive this in your own cellar.
Yeah, the Coravin's a really interesting tool. The one thing I worry about is that anytime you have to puncture that cork, you're going to change the dynamics and the kinetics of the bottle aging. So no matter what, and they say, you replace it with gas and all that. So they've engineered a way to minimize all those effects as much as possible. But just know that it's probably not going to be quite the same if you take a little Coravin, a little pull out of that bottle, and then lay it down for another year, and go check on it again. That I haven't done that, and to actually validate my thought there, but that would be what I would think would happen. It's kind of logical. Just that whatever inert gas you put in there, you just left a hole in it. It's going to have a faster rate of return to the outside atmosphere. So, the cork is spongy, but it's not perfect.
And what about decanting? What do you think about like the 08 in terms of like, is that a wine that we should have decanted before we drank?
So I opened this bottle 2 hours ago, and that really helped to open it up. I thought a few hours was going to be right. I'm sure as it sits here and opens up a little more, it'll just keep getting more interesting and, continue to kind of develop. But I'll tell you, right when we opened it, we pulled the cork. We didn't decant it yesterday in our team tasting. It was already exploding out of the glass. So does it need it? I love to do it because I feel like it's a great thing to do with a cool old bottle of wine that you really are going to enjoy. But man, it didn't shy away from just being poured straight out of the bottle. So that was kind of fun to see.
Cool. Let's kind of move on to the 16 because let's hear a little bit about that, and then we can start comparing them. So I'm going to take us over and talk a little bit about what was going on in Fontanella world in 2016. So fast forward to 2016, that's the year that Jeff and I purchased the 55-acre property just to the west of us. It's the adjoining parcel, and there was an existing cave that had been drilled but not completed. And we had permits on that property to plant 21 acres of vines. So this is a picture of the cave right when we purchased it. And if you look closely, you can see John and Drew. They're both lacrosse players. playing lacrosse against the wall. They're doing
Wall ball.
So, which is super fun. And if you were to look today, which we'll have some pictures later, but just above where there's grass above it is all planted to vine right now. So we've planted those 7 acres since we purchased it. 7 of the 21 have been planted already. So that was one of the big events of 2016. And we bought the property and we went right into the process of getting the land all ready and prepped for planting. So it's a pretty long process. I mean, Jeff, here we're just, maybe you can tell us, we're ripping the soil.
So before that even, we went and dug 1 million holes and had a geologist and our viticulturalist team kind of go through and do this really detailed mapping so that we can see in higher detail where the soil breaks are and get a greater sense for the effective rooting depth block by block. We can see that maybe this block lacks a little organic material, so we're going to get a little more compost in there. We can see that this block might need more of something else. So this is the time where we go in and we rip. That's what the bulldozer's doing there. He's just got about a 3-foot shank that's going to pull and break up and fracture and tumble the dirt. And then we're going to go in right after this and add our amendments like compost and things to that soil to get it blended and homogeneous, so you don't have like a layer of suitable soil here and then some rock and then another layer of suitable soil. So this is the reason we get the soil ripped and prepped for planting, is that we get a more homogeneous window for the roots to get established in. It also fractures it and opens up all these little pores and all these things for those roots, those young roots, to actually get in and establish themselves. From the time we rip to the time where the soil is sort of recompacted to a stage where young vines aren't going to be able to get you have a couple years, I guess is what I'm trying to say, before those, let's say 3 years before the soil sort of kind of re-hardens up, and the young roots kind of get really slowed down and can't penetrate into where we want them to go. So if we do a good job ripping, we're going to get really good established roots in those first 2 years. And that's basically the goal in those first 2 years, just growing roots.
Yeah, it's cool photos. And if you look at the photo on the left, that's Jeff standing there monitoring the ripping.
Looking official, no clipboard, nothing. Look at
that. And also in 2016, that was the year, you guys all know out there, we're big dog people. So we had Riley, our black lab, and Peyton, our yellow, which is kind of more of a white lab. We're both our kind of older dogs. And that was the year that we adopted Piper, our little Shih Tzu. So these are my boys out there with the 3 dogs, all of them smiling. I think both our labs live to be 15 and a half. So I think it's that good winery living that really helps. So then, I love these pictures so you can see the boys. By 2016, the boys were, John was 10 and Drew turned 9 that year. And this is them eating grapes, which they still love to do. And on the right, the picture on the right, you have Jeff showing Drew how to do a punch down.
Yeah. Look at that. That was a good batch.
Lawyer that you are, that it's not child labor if they're your own children.
No, it's not child.
No, he wasn't being paid.
We make them work even though they didn't get paid. And this is like the other huge event.
Ooh, look at that.
You guys all know Jennifer. Well, Jennifer, this was like one of my favorite stories. So in 2016, Jennifer's boyfriend, Dustin, calls me up and says, I know you guys do engagements at the winery. You guys have done them before. He's like, I really want to ask Jen to marry me at the winery, but I want her to do all the work and set it up. And so we made Jennifer set up for her own engagement.
It took me 2 days.
I mean, stringing lights and getting she went and bought chocolates and all the swag and stuff for it. And it was just such a great, the event was so great. We videotaped the whole thing. And I think, Jen, were you surprised?
Horrified. fine. I'm still sweating. I sweat anytime you tell the story. I'm still really mad at you. I hate being surprised, but it was really magical. And just also to tie it back in, I don't know if you guys remember this, but you gifted me a Magnum of the '08 Cab for my wedding. So I got to have that at the wedding, and it was so good. It was my first time experiencing a vintage of that age and quality that I hid it in another room, and I was not about to let the riffraff taste it. I was, if you were like on the inside, I'd be like, yo, check out that room. There's something real special in there.
You're hoarding.
Yes, I did.
How many people out there hoard your Fontanella is what I want to know. So then the last thing, kind of big thing of 2016 was that we, our Chardonnay starred in a novel. So, well, I mean, I think that's a little tongue in cheek. So we were mentioned in the Tom Clancy book, True Faith and Allegiance. I can't remember. Jeff, do you remember what page it was?
No, I don't.
Anyway, so they make a reference in there that he was, the main character was sitting enjoying a glass of Fontanella Chardonnay. So we made it into print for eternity. So we thought that was
coolest ever. That's one of our club members is not a producer, a publisher for this line. And so he got to press on a little lever to let us know we were in there. That was just the coolest.
Yeah.
Oh, you know.
It was awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the actual wine from 2016. Jeff.
Okay, yeah. So 16. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm thinking by 16, I had gone through. Geez, I mean, because 05 we bought the property, and then we had the 100-year flood, and then we had the 08, 09 crash, and then we had the ice ages and the rain and the terrible challenges of 10 and 11, which fortunately the wines turned out pretty well. I mean, we had to discard a bunch that just didn't get through the cold weather, but and then we had the earthquake of 14. So by the time 16 came around, it was like, oh God, please, just a normal boring year, please, because it had been such a crazy journey, right, for those first years. And that's what we got. I mean, we called it the Goldilocks vintage, but by most metrics, 16, we had an earlier bud break, just a slightly early one. So that was good. That's almost preferable. And then the weather we didn't really have any major problems. And we had, in 15, sorry, I forgot about the crazy drought in 15. I mean, that was sort of the depths of California's drought. We were all very worried about our water supply. And finally 16, the rains came, spring came like normal. We had basically ideal weather, or what we're going to call typical Napa weather through the growing season. We didn't have any huge heat spikes. We didn't have frost. We didn't have to worry about rains. And the harvest was like clockwork. Like if you looked it up in your textbook and they said, look, Cabernet comes in on October 15th, that's when we picked. It was kind of, it was kind of that regimented. And the thing that made this vintage in my mind was that ideal spring, early summer condition where the vines they weren't stressed. We could control their access to water, so they weren't overly, dealing with heat waves and things, but we could kind of slowly control their water availability with irrigation. We were able to make really thick skins that year. So the vines just gave us these good yield. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't too light, but the thing that was really outstanding in my memory banks was the thickness of the skins. And when we get that quality, that usually translates into some very concentrated phenolics, but not this overpowering type tannin, but just a very concentrated, broad structure, right? And that was, to me, what got really excited about. We could see that even when we were just destemming the fruit. The grapes were coming into the winery, and as soon as they were hitting the tank, I mean, the first pump over, the wines were like dark. And it usually takes some time to start evolving that, but all those color precursors and everything in the skins were just so abundant that it was just, it was very freely coming into the tank, and all the way through the harvest, the fermentation, you could just see this incredible color. When we talk about, the wines are black and inky, this was really that year. I mean, to me, this was a benchmark in terms of that color development. And the aromatics, everything in the tanks was really complex and beautiful. We were getting the most incredible violet kind of aromatics in those ferments, which is a really neat thing. If you have a chance at harvest to get near some cab tanks that are in their early to midway through fermentation, you get this incredible violet and floral quality that comes out of those tanks. And 16 was definitely one of those. In terms of composition, because I think we had some people asking about composition via the questions, a little bit different. The 08, we were mostly volcanic ash dominant. This 016 is dominant about 50% of shale. So this is, you know, the soil and the fruit grown here from our first vintages. And we still had another good chunk, about 25% volcanic ash, as well as some gravel component if you've done the full barrel tasting. So 2 other Mount Veeder vineyards that are just, again, a little bit north of us up the ridge. But in this vintage, that tannin component, we just really didn't see the need for Merlot. So typically we're using Merlot. So the 08 had about 9% Merlot from Mount Veeder as well, to help it kind of fill the gaps and round out all that power and the concentration that the cab was giving us, to help kind of, you know, bridge the gaps, smooth it out. This vintage, it was 99% Cabernet. Just, we used a tiny bit of Merlot, basically in top and then just a touch, to not break tradition and go 100%. But so it's mostly Cabernet, and just a very, very complex wine. To me, when I'm talking about my favorite wines, I'm not necessarily looking at, okay, the most epic vintage that people wrote about or whatnot, but the complexity is the thing that I key on. And it's the balance in that wine that to me is sort of, it's giving me all the precursors that I want. So I know that, like, this is a vintage that's going to age really well and hopefully develop into something like the 08, where you've got this really nice wine that's going to stand the test of time. With that, where are we? 16.
So really quick, our friend Jim Effelman has a question. He says, how many days does it take to pick, for example, the cab, and how much manpower is involved? Because I always think it's fascinating when we talk about, like, your process in picking a cab vineyard.
Okay, so there isn't a set number of days or a time, or you know, it's a lot less, I guess, programmed than people would guess. It isn't like we say, well, we picked Zin in September, and then we start picking Cabernet. A lot of times, especially with hillsides, you're going to have slopes and things that kind of give you different aspects to the sun. So maybe this corner gets a little more sun. Maybe there's a little more wind here. I don't know. We go through and we're mapping all that as it matures. And it may be that we start seeing, okay, this corner of the vineyard is getting riper a little sooner. And we might go in there and pick a small amount from this part. There's years where we're just picking the south facing side because it tends to get a lot more sun in September and October as the sun drops on the horizon. The morning sun side, which, you know, you wouldn't think would be, faster maturing because the afternoon sun's a little warmer, but sometimes it's the morning side on the hills because of the dynamics. We have very warm mornings up at elevation, whereas the valley floor, things cool down. Once you drop below a certain temperature, the vines stop ripening. So up here, sometimes the morning side actually never shuts down at night, and we get phenolic ripening in the dark hours. We don't get sugar accumulation, we don't get photosynthesis, but we still get ripening. So it's a really, I guess a long answer to your question is, some years we might go in and pick 7 or 8 times one vineyard that has multiple blocks, and other years it might be just kind of coming in as designed, like 16, where we just went in and we picked it in 3 days. Manpower is huge. We hand pick everything. With the ranginess and the lean on the hillsides, it's really hard to get any kind of mechanized harvester in here. It used to be that we wouldn't even consider that, but the advances in that technology, those harvesters are getting really high quality now. So they just have to kind of solve the problem of dealing with very steep slopes that tilt and being safe enough to operate. They can do it. It's not necessarily very safe. So we're not quite there yet. But the other thing for us is we like to hand harvest. I don't think that the mechanization's ever actually going to be better in quality than the hand harvesting, because you're still going to get some other things happening, and you get damage to positions, which damages the fruit for next year. Those kind of things happen. So it's getting very close to comparable, but it is challenging. So we depend on a lot of labor. We depend on skilled crews to come in and hand harvest the fruit. Typically we're harvesting here. Sometimes we're starting at about 2 a.m. Sometimes it might be midnight, just depends on the weather. And we like to pick in the night hours when it's nice and cold. So we've got big LED lights on the tractor. The guys have headlamps and they can see really well. It's getting the fruit delivered to the winery in a very cool manner that helps us get the processed fruit, once we've destemmed it by processing, into the tank in a very cold way. And we avoid a lot of oxidation and other things that might start to degrade the quality of the harvest. So that step, even from our back porch into our tanks, we're still trying to minimize any exposure that way.
Well, let's get to tasting the 16 and doing our little comparison, so we can kind of keep plugging along here.
So we talked a little on the composition. This is almost all Cabernet, 99%. And for me, I mean, right away, just the difference of the fruit character. So you get this, to me, a very bright cherry. The acidity is still very intact in the characteristic of it. So, but the fresh fruits, the berry quality, I still get a lot of nice hints of like vanilla or maybe like espresso from the barrel roast kind of lingering in the aromatics. And I just get, again, what I see in this wine I like about it, which reminded me of the 08 kind of all the way through, was that there was very many layers to this wine. Now, you've got to dig a little harder to get through them in the young wine because it's a little more compact, which, whatever, expend a little more time, get your covers. That really helps you kind of break down and work layer to layer, work through the components. But to me, that brightness of the fruit is carried on a really nice long tannin structure, which again, to me, I remember tasting the fruit in the vineyard and how thick the skins developed. That's the really high quality tannin that we're looking for. And then the mouthful, still youthful, it's very vibrant, and all that acidity in fruit is still very concentrated.
This is like such a layperson's way to say it, but I get a lot of questions about tannins. And for me, and just tell me if I'm totally bullshitting right now, but this is kind of how I break it down for me. Tannins in a younger wine are a sensation. It's not a smell, it's not a taste, it's a texture, right? It's kind of like sandpaper tongue or grippy tongue. And then in a wine that's aged, and the 08's a great example, they kind of like smooth out and become a little bit more slippery, like velvet. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, tannin, yes. To me, tannin's all about the texture and how it interacts with the actual flavor profiles. You're tasting the tartness of the fruit. You're tasting the acid of it. You're tasting any sweetness, which I do get a bit of sweetness in this wine. There's no sugar left in it, but that sweetness can come from other sensations. Salty, sweet, sour, bitter. Those are kind of the main. There's also umami, by the way, which is sort of considered the fifth, element or component of taste, which is a little out there for some people, but it's more of a savory. In general, the way I think of it, it's a savory component. It's something very, almost comforting, like a broth. Sometimes soy kind of has that characteristic. Certain proteins kind of have an umami. It's really hard. It's sort of ephemeral, the way to describe umami, but it's an overall very pleasing sensation, right? It's another feel. It's a little bit elusive, like tannin, right?
Would you say the 08 or the 16 has more of that soy umami thing?
The 08 has developed a lot of that, right?
Totally the 08.
Right. And Rachel was in our team tasting. She was like, umami, she kind of screamed it out. So kind of spot on there. But again, it's one of those feel things, kind of like tannin. And for us, look, the young wine, the older wine, when we're trying to develop the structure of the wine, we're trying to make it balanced. We don't want you to just feel tannin, because we could easily bring in wines and overly concentrate them, and they would be so highly tannic that they would be very unpleasant when they're young. But I guess the philosophy is those won't age very well. The fruit backbone of this wine, to me, is much more important in the ageability and the aging potential, because it's going to age faster. The tannins are resistant to aging. So if you've got this huge wall of tannins wrapped around a less dominant core of fruit, and that fruit just shrinks very fast, you're gobstopper, like you never got to the middle, like it didn't work, right? So, or the Tootsie Roll, is that what I'm thinking? Yeah, you never got the sweet center. So you got to have that acidity, which is really the backbone of all those fruit components that you get. So if it's cherry or blueberry or boysenberry or reduced rhubarb or whatever wine geekery we can pull from our tasting note cloud, the acidity is so important for that. That part needs to be intact and needs to balance and needs to stand up to the tannin profile when it's young, in order to have to me, a good aging potential, right?
That's great.
Yeah, and so, I mean, what do I think will happen to this wine in 5 or 10 years? I mean, I really, in my tasting library here, I mean, I just really feel like the characteristics are very common between those two vintages. The quality of the fruit, the way that you have to keep going back to that tasting glass, and you can kind of keep peeling back layers if you're working at it. That's what I want to see, because that really is a wine that is worth laying down and exploring, 5 years out, 10 years out, whatever.
All right, so speaking of wines worth laying down, and now we've kind of gone through the 08 and 16, I think I really wanted to take a few minutes here to talk a little bit about our first ever estate reserve Cabernet. And so we decided that we wanted to, I know we don't, you guys haven't tried it yet, but Jeff was going to talk a little bit about our 2015 estate reserve Cabernet. He's got a bottle of it there, and we wanted to share with you a little bit about this first vintage ever off of our estate vineyard. So,
Jeff, I'm just going to come get a little top up from you in the cellar, so I'll just be right there, okay?
Don't tell anyone we opened a bottle. Yeah, so the 15 was really, it wasn't necessarily going to be our first vintage of estate. And I kept just 2 barrels of the fruit because it was the young crop. It was kind of the first berries that came off. And Karen kind of went through and said, no, you're not keeping this for yourself. So the 15, this is a combination of a few different clones. Hey, there's Jen. That we've planted here, all in the shale type soil. And like I said, it was a very limited production, as it was just the first kind of baby crop off the property. It used to be that there was this kind of axiom that the young vintages off a vineyard weren't as high quality, and it might be but the thought that the way we used to farm, they used to over water and overdo the young vines, trying to get into production faster. So it's kind of a farming mechanism. We don't really do that anymore. We're much more in tune with developing the root zone properly and slowly bringing the vine along. And so we do get berries and fruit that is extremely high quality and ready to use. So this was our first chance at playing with the estate fruit. The wine is just a really pure fruit, cherry quality wine. I think, I mean, it's hard to compare it, but I mean, in terms of the Mount Veeder, I think in the Mount Veeder selection, we're going to get a little more of the dark fruit and the dark currant. There's a little more of that black fruit in there, whereas this is a little more pure, and we're selecting for barrels that just have a much longer and that really beautiful drawn out length to the tannins, even while young. A little bit less power, so to speak, like the Mount Veeder, and a little more body and lushness. A little more in common with the G3 in that shape and that umami and that texture type of feel in this wine. And again, it's, I mean, this would be a really fun one for us to do some side-by-sides with G3, because this vineyard's expression is going to be a little bit different, more aromatic, more elegant. And again, we're aging these barrels a little longer. So we're continuing to develop. So whereas the Mount Veeder is about a 2-year barrel program, the Reserve is a 3-year barrel program, and it really helps to develop all those precursors that we'd like. So kind of amplify that complexity and concentration.
And we had someone out there asking what constitutes an estate wine. And just to give you a little background, so an estate wine is a wine that's made on property that you own or control. And so when we bought the property, we did not have vineyards here, and we built not only the winery, but then we planted the estate vineyard. And it was actually 8 years ago. I got pictures of the kids planting it. But it's the actual vines that are grown here on our first parcel that we bought back in 2005. And it was 2012 that we planted, and we shepherded the grapes all along. And so any of the fruit that comes off of our land, we can label as estate. So there's strict rules about what that is. And so these are really the 2015 is the premier first and only first vintage that we'll ever have off of our estate property. So it's really, really a special wine. And not only is it unique and special because it's the first ever and there's only one first time, but as Jeff talks about the quality of the grapes and the quality of and caliber of the wines coming out of it, it's truly, truly amazing.
Yeah, I think if you like our style and you like how we shape wines and mold that fruit characteristic, and that's kind of our approach to how we create balance, it's all of that a little bit amplified in the Estate Reserve. I think you'll really be happy with these wines.
I always talk about it as sort of the actual fruits of your labor, in a way. It's really the first thing you've taken all the way through from dirt to bottle. It's really special. It's really good. Thanks for giving me some. I guess I just took it, but that's okay.
Like I had a choice.
So we have one more question about what type of grapes are planted on our estate vineyard, and I'll just leave it to Jeff to answer that one.
So thus far, it's all Cabernet. We have 5 different clones that we're playing with. So it's gonna be really cool because we're gonna start to build those layers and all that complexity by using these different clones. And 337, we have clone 4. They're kind of random numbers. I won't bore you with those, but the selections really help to give you some power, some aromatics. They give us kind of length and finish, and these clones tend to kind of create the palate, right? It's the spice rack that we're going to barbecue with. We've broadened it out with a lot of clones, and we're going to be able to play with that a lot, and really dial in this estate program for Cabernet. And then we still have another, what do we have, 14, 15 acres left to plant. So, natural disaster, if 17 fires hadn't happened, we might have even planted out, who knows, a lot of things. And then whatever, COVID, we're getting sick of these disasters. They're getting in the way of our wine tasting and growing fun. So anyway, yeah, we still have a lot of dreams in there. We know a lot of good ideas about maybe the first whites on the property, perhaps a little plot of Zinfandel or some Cab Franc and those kind of things. So there's a lot of possibilities that are kind of on the map or on the table at the moment.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the Estate Cabernet. So this is the bottle. I know Jeff was kind of showing it earlier, and I think hopefully you guys can see it a little bit larger now, but this is the label. This is our new label, our new packaging. And the 2015, we haven't publicly released it for sale, and it was our hope to put it out a little bit earlier, but we've had to, because of COVID, we've had to move out our release until September. So we will be releasing the Estate Reserve Cabernet 2015 in September. That being said, we are going to be offering it to you guys for your opportunity to buy it. There was a small opportunity for people who came to a winemaker to purchase some, but for you guys are having an opportunity to purchase it. Now, I suspect it'll sell out before we even release it. The bottles are going to be $145 a bottle, and we actually have it up on our website. So Wine Club members, you still get your Wine Club discount off of it. The thing about the 15 is that we only have 50 cases. So once those 50 cases are sold, that's going to be it. And so we're hoping that we, get you guys in there and get a chance to purchase it. The opportunity you have is because it's not coming out to September, we don't have to worry about heat holds for shipping. We'll ship it after the heat. And if you use the promo stock up, STOCKUP, stock up, and you buy 3 or more bottles, then the shipping is just $1. So again, but it wouldn't be shipped out till September when we actually release it. So if you log on to the website, you can still purchase, or you can for the first time purchase the 2015 Estate Reserve Cabernet. We'll be releasing it out probably in the coming week or two to the greater wine club and public as well, but we thought we'd give you guys the opportunity to start first. And in addition, I've noticed that a lot of people have been asking about the 08 Cabernet and purchasing the 08 just individually, because we still have the pack of the 08 and the 16 on our website. But if you just wanted to buy the 08, we do have a limited supply available, and the 08, we're gonna leave that up until tomorrow. So you'll have until tomorrow to purchase it, because we have a very limited supply of the 08 since it's a library wine. And it's $150 for the 08 Cab if you wanted to purchase any of that. And again, our stock up promo is still available if you bought 3 or more bottles. And the 08 could ship now. If you wanted to do a mix of the 08 and the 2015, we would just ship them all in September when it's available. So so that's kind of some fun stuff we've got going on. I hope you guys take advantage of the opportunity that you guys have to be the first ones to purchase this 15 Estate Reserve. And we do have a YouTube channel now. So if you go onto YouTube, you can check out Fontanella Family Winery, and on the YouTube channel, you can find some of the past webinars. We haven't gotten all of them up, but we'll post today's webinar as well if you wanted to share it or check it out. And it was funny, I was looking back on our YouTube channel, and we have some footage as well from the earthquake when we were on the news and everything from back in the earthquake.
I need to finish this whole bottle. Watch that.
Wait for me. Coming over.
I know. Well, it just reminds you that we endure, right? And our next virtual tasting is, we're not sure yet, as there's been some opening of different shelter in places. We wanted to wait and see what was going to be happening in terms of what's going on. So as you guys see, if those of you who do get polls, you will see that a poll just popped up. And we're trying to find out a best time to do these down the road, because some people are going to start having work on the West Coast, and 4:30 might be too early. And wow, but a lot of you guys, as I'm watching, I'm still like this 4:30 time slot. So anyways, we're trying to find a time that works best for as many of you as possible. So as that poll comes through, I'll let that be known. And while that's happening, I also
Can I vote?
No.
No.
Can't start tasting at lunch on Friday?
Oh, maybe you can vote. I like that vote.
So I wanted to share, though, some really cool pictures. As I was pulling up pictures for 08 and 16, oops, wait, I messed up my screen share. Okay, so in 1983, I have a picture of our property from 1983, and I know it's kind of hard to see because it's an old photo, but you can see the pond, and there is a building there, and that building is our current office actually right now. And this was 1983. And then you have a picture from 2008, so the year that we opened the winery. And you can see our house is there, which was built probably in the 80s, not long after that first picture. And then the winery is there. And so it's really kind of fun to see the two. And then now, this was a picture that was taken just a few weeks ago. This is in 2020. So you can see what the property looks like now. And it's just amazing. I'm so pleased. So, and as looks like everyone still likes this Fridays at 4:30 time slot that we have, or 4:30 in California and 7:30 on the East Coast. So anyways, thank you guys for sharing your thoughts on that, because that really helps us to plan down the future. So I think that kind of wraps everything up. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
No, thanks for joining us. These have been great. And thanks for all of your support too. These are always scary times. We've been through a bunch of these scares, but we really appreciate everyone's support. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. And we hope to see you guys again. We'll have some more webinars. We'll be reaching out more. We love this opportunity to see so many of you and enjoy a chance to drink a glass of wine with you and talk to you about wine. So great weekend. And
we haven't done port yet.
Oh.
One of my favorites.
All right, so port could be on the horizon.
Got my vote.
Thank you so much, and take care. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone. Happy weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Mother's Day, too.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day to all you amazing mothers out there. All of you kids out there, make sure you buy your mom some Fontanella wine. Reserves in a state reserve, right?
Probably.
Take care. Bye.